Welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to our last episode of season one. Yeah, I bet y'all didn't know that. This is season one. We're going to come to you live again, but next year. Lee and I need a break. Thank you for tuning in to Just Talk Live, a faith and justice talk show. I am so happy to be here with Lee, my co-host. I feel like I haven't seen you or talked to you in a while. We've both been busy, even though we're starting to do a lot of collaboration projects together, but it's nice to be with you tonight.
Yeah, it's been a busy time, busy season. It's always busy when you get towards these holidays. So trying to get everything in, but yeah, it's hard to believe this is our last one of the season, and we are coming back.
Yes,
But
we will be
Destiny and
back.
I have been doing this since April,
Second.
and we're going to give ourselves a little holiday. But we're really excited about what's to come. And we hope that in the new year you'll still join us. But we're really excited that we'll be doing this again. So you're not getting rid of us yet.
No.
Yeah, so we're very excited about that. We did want to also remind people that Monday, December the 1st, will be Giving Tuesday and Giving
December
Tuesday.
1st.
Up. Hold on.
I'm like, at first I was like, what we doing Monday?
Yeah, it wouldn't be Giving Tuesday if it was on a Monday now, would it? So Giving Tuesday is December the 1st, Tuesday. And Destiny and I will be a part of that. We are a ministry. We're under kind of the umbrella of the Presbyterian Church, and we will be helping out hosting that event, which will be on the PCUSA's Facebook page. And it's going to be an all-day event, kind of like a telethon, which is going to be really fun to really raise awareness. Yeah, raise awareness of the ministry and yeah, just kind of educate people about what the church is doing and have a little fun at the same time. So that's going to be really fun to be a part of that. And so that's December the 1st, Tuesday, #Giving Tuesday. And help us out. Help the ministry out if you can, and join us. There's going to be prayer. You can be able to call into if you want prayer. There'll be worship. There'll be a game similar to we'll call it Presby Squares, kind of like Hollywood Squares, where Destiny Hodges will be the host. And yeah, we'll have 4 more co-moderators there. So join us all day that day, December the 1st. And I think that's it for right now, right?
Yeah, I think you covered it. Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
And check out the Womanist Advent that Unbound published.
Yes, author Destiny Hodges.
I'll let you plug that.
Yeah, we'll plug that at the end, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, to say more. Kind of end for the holiday season. But right now we are going to welcome our first guest. We're going to have 2 guests, 2 segments this evening, and we're gonna be welcoming Michael W. Waters, who is the author For Beautiful Black Boys Who Believe in a Better World, which is an amazing book, and he is going to join us right now. So welcome, Michael.
Hello. Thank you so much for the privilege of being with you today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. And before we dive into learning a little bit more about your book, can you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how did you start writing?
Sure. Well, again, the name is Michael Waters. I am a pastor, a 5th generation, in fact, in the African Methodist Episcopal Church tradition. I'm the founding pastor of Abundant Life AME Church here in Dallas, Texas. I also serve as an adjunct professor at my alma mater, Perkins School of Theology at Southern Methodist University. I have had the honor of serving as the chair or lead of another number of organizations in our community. I've chaired the City of Dallas's MLK Community Center, which serves about 350,000 individuals each year in terms of their social, economic, recreational needs. I served as the inaugural chair of Faith Forward Dallas, which is a gathering of faith leaders of multiple communities, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Sikh, all working together on the cause of peace and justice in our community. I'm also a part of the Dallas Black Clergy Agenda, and I serve with my colleagues in areas of peace and justice. I am an author, I'm a writer. Before COVID, I traveled fairly frequently to speak across the country, and by the gift of technology, and still able to do so today. But I really am delighted to have an opportunity to share with you and your viewers today.
Yeah, we're really glad you're here. And I was telling Michael, we were introduced to this book. A leader in our church read this book as a part of a ministry that happened during the beginning, towards near the beginning of the pandemic, to read kids' books. And this was one of the books, and I think it's for everybody, not just kids. But I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the book and about the inspiration of it all.
Sure. Well, the inspiration is our oldest son, Jeremiah, who is 14 years old, but it really covers the arc of his experience from about 5 years old to about 10 or 11, as he was experiencing the very racialized realities of our world, and unfortunately was exposed immediately to the crisis that has long befallen the Black community in America. You know, James Baldwin talks about to be relatively conscious and Black in America is to be in a rage almost all of the time because of the constant threats, the constant harms that come to our community. And so he's made aware of them largely through my own experience of reading, engaging, and of activism, as well as my wife's. And so he became aware of Trayvon Martin, became aware of Mike Brown, all of these instances that have happened over his very young life. And a very inquisitive young man would often ask questions as to why did these things happen? Well, ultimately, as he has grown up, grown in wisdom and knowledge of the world, and really been bombarded by these things over time, a particular tragedy within our community, a young man by the name of Jordan Edwards, 15 years old, Black honor student and athlete at Mesquite High School, was shot and killed by a police officer who shot indiscriminately into the vehicle where he was along with his brothers and cousins. And it's often been my case for years. I was asked to come and to share with the family. Our church hosted a citywide vigil and direct action training, had leaders nationally, NAACP, Sean King, others who came to our congregation as we organized. And then I was asked to speak at the vigil that happened in his community. It was a particularly painful vigil because it was filled with all of his peers, all of these young men and young women who were broken by this tragedy. Well, when we got home, my family was in attendance, as they frequently are. Our son entered the room and began to express the things that he was tired of people hurting each other, tired of people not liking each other because of the color of their skin. So about maybe 2.5 weeks later, I was on a flight to Los Angeles to speak at a conference, and I heard his words playing again and again in my mind, and took a pen to paper, and about an hour and a half into the flight, turned to my wife and said, "Check this out." And she read it. She said, "I think you have something here." And so that was really the beginnings, the genesis of this work, inspired by my son, with the recognition that he was not alone in these harrowing experiences, and the hope that maybe there was a story through our own family's experience that could help others as they process the same.
Yeah, I think your book was very timely. I know when it was read, I immediately start to reflect about the pain and the feelings and emotions. I can remember where I was for each of those murders. Let's call them what they are. They were murders. I remember vividly where I was for each of those murders, and how I started to cry, but yet rejoice that there is a book out there with a different narrative that is written for people who look like who were murdered. And I think that is so important, especially now that I have a 1-year-old nephew who later I will have to explain to him, all of the processings and killings and murders that are taking place in America. Because as you know, society just finds new ways to reinvent itself, and as much activism that we do, the violence in the streets and the prejudice isn't stopping. So it's just like, I'm glad that there are resources and there's tools and there's people that are sharing their story and sharing their lament, so that way we can move forward, not only as a Black community, but a community as a whole. Because I think, and Lee and I share this a lot, the best way to make change is to share the narratives and to share the stories. But I think how you wrote the book was so beautifully woven, because you had a chance to experience that pain, experience that hurt, but you did it in a way that it was within community, and to let you know that you weren't alone. So I just wanted to thank you for how the book was woven, especially coming from a voice of a young person who was the main character of the book.
Well, I really appreciate that. And, the reality is, for years now, I've heard from persons across the country. I wrote a blog for several years for the Huffington Post, and it became fairly popular, to be honest with you, particularly as it relates to the movement for Black lives. And I would write about these cases both locally and nationally, just to get these ideas in the world and really press towards justice. And then a very interesting thing began to happen. Some of the lawyers and some of the family members of some of the more well-known cases began to reach out to me. There were persons who traveled to Dallas actually to meet with me and asked me to help write about their case as they were running into brick walls, right? And so all those experiences led me to the recognition that there are limited resources that are made available to people in terms of not just how to process these moments, but how to move towards action. And if we're struggling with it as adults, imagine trying to make sense of this as a child. It's really a challenge, particularly for some young people, where they are told very early on that these are helpers, like these are people you turn to for help. And yet they see these constant stories of the helpers actually bringing harm. Not to mention the fact that, for a young Black boy or a young Black girl, when you are bombarded by these images, at some point you stop just seeing the images and you start seeing yourself. You start wondering about your own safety. And so, again, people are reaching out saying, I'm having a hard time having this conversation with my children, whether they are Black or white or Latino, Indigenous people, it didn't matter. This is a very hard conversation because they want to know, why is it that the helpers are harming? And at some point, frankly, it becomes challenging to lead in all the time. Well, they're not all bad, or there are a few bad apples, right? Because children start wondering, well, how many bad apples are they? Because it just seems to be so constant. And so I'm grateful. Thank you for the gift of those words. I've been overjoyed as individuals sent pictures of themselves with the book and with their children with the book on a few occasions, which really moved me to tears. Some families were saying that their young Black boys in particular wouldn't put down the book. They're going to sleep with it. They're walking around with it, or it's the first thing that they would run to when they came home. And for me, that spoke of, I think, of a ontological affirmation, that they have value, that they have purpose, that they are loved, that they are celebrated, and that there are persons who are committed to making the world not just better for them, but for all children.
Yeah, and for it to come in like the kind of this way within a children's book, I think through the mouths and the eyes of kids comes so much knowledge for us, and for me, I recommended this book to a family member who has a biracial child. And as a family, I mean, a white family that in some cases are very ignorant of these conversations that Black families have to have with their children. Not only did it help her, because now she has to have a conversation with her very similar age 7-year-old biracial child, and it really did open up a wave of conversation within the family, you know, for white families to actually to have a book like this and say, this isn't just something that is kind of a concept that people talk about, but this is real. This is like based on reality. And to have that in a kid's book and to have it just so stripped down and say, this is how it is, I think is also a powerful thing as well, to really say, like, this is a part of this is part of childhood for Black kids. And this is a reality and this is real. And I think, yeah.
No, that's powerful. And I thank you for that gift as well. I mean, that it is our story. And I think that's what the question I've been asked the most about is, you know, how did you come up with this book? I said, we came up with it by living. This is our reality. This is what we have faced. You know, if anything, I would simply ascribe to our experience. And you know, frankly, I felt emotion as I read it. There are persons who read the manuscript before the illustrations were available, who were moved by the words on the page. But I want to give a nod to Keisha Morris, the illustrator, because I think she did a dynamic job of providing pictures that were emotive, that draw emotion out and really allow us to connect not just with the words on the pages, but the emotions and feeling behind them. But again, it is always a gift to know that individuals are finding the book. And I think that's what's most exciting, to hear from, you know, persons who say, I've been waiting for this book. I've supplemented it with other resources, but, you know, I've been waiting for this one, the one that names the names, the one that, you know, centers Black life. And then also, which I think is also very important, one that ends with hope, but it's a hope that's not falsified. It's a hope that's born out of our collective action. Because at the end of the day, the prayer is that we are raising up a generation of anti-racists who will be successful where, frankly, for so many generations before, we have failed. And so you have to point to the promise of a better day that is known through our collective action.
And as Lee and I often like to do, we just want to let people sit with that for a second, because that was a powerful statement, especially with the call to action piece at the end with the hope. Mm-hmm. So since you lifted up the illustrator, I think she did a phenomenal job with the pictures. Just my own critique. The thing that I like the most is that not only do I see people that look like me, but they're, you know, dark skin, natural hair, which is a facade I usually don't see in the movies, in the televisions, in books. It's hard. Like I said, I have a 1-year-old nephew now, and he has big curly hair, but it's hard to find books that, you know, depict him. Or depict natural Black people. So I just wanted to hear, maybe you can't answer it, or maybe you can if you helped craft that vision. One, I want to say thank you, because like I said, it's hard. You know, we're always forced to fit into this white supremacy culture, to straighten our hair or to do something other than our natural state of hair. But also I want to ask, like, what was the thinking or the logic, or wasn't one and she just drew a figure and you were like, oh, that's perfect, let's go. Was there any intentionality behind the images?
Well, you know, just with our own son, Jeremiah, I mean, he has beautiful locks that extend.
Okay, so he actually has, okay. Because I know that was a theme throughout the book.
Like I said, this is our story. I mean, it's our experience. And so you can't tell it now because my follicles have betrayed me. But there was a time when I had a variety of hairstyles as well. Everyone in my family, my wife, our son, our two daughters have just beautiful natural hair, and I love it. I mean, that's my mother has locks. Natural hair, authentic Black beauty has always been celebrated in the diversity of the diaspora, because there's so many expressions, right? But that beauty has been celebrated, and the reality is not only has that beauty been celebrated, but it also has been racialized and attacked. I can't forget about how the Obama girls were criticized for wearing their hair the way it naturally grows out of their head, right? When a sitting member of Congress said that their hair was un-American. That was a phenomenal statement, and it's something that I've never forgotten. Right here in the state of Texas, where I live, just this past year, there was a young man who was almost not able to graduate because of his hair, right? And we know the challenges that adults have had with their hair being called unprofessional, unfit for the workplace, right? The way it grows from their head. So I have to connect this historically, because as our forebears were being abducted and kidnapped from Africa, one of the first things that happened by the slave traffickers was that their heads were shaved. Now, one aspect of that has been argued that the heads or the threat thereof on this transit. But the issue was that the hair was a central part of African spirituality. And so by shaving their head, it attacked their identity. And I think the very same thing has happened. I think you're absolutely right that so many things within our culture, things that are normal to us, the width of our nose, the darkness of our pigmentation, the coil of our hair have been demonized, have been suggested to be unnatural or not beautiful. And we know that's not the case, right? And when you allow such a lie to manifest for so long, it causes great psychological and spiritual harm. And so, yes, it was intended. It was my hope that as persons read this book, and I think Keisha did a phenomenal job with her drawings, that they would be affirmed in all way possible, right? That you'll see someone, even as a caricature, that looks like you and that is celebrated in the fullness of their beauty. I mean, it was a kind of subversive action. It's a very long title for beautiful Black boys who believe in a better world, but it was a necessary title because it's very rare that Black boys or girls are assigned their beauty. And I wanted to make sure that they saw it, even if they never opened the book. I wanted the cover itself to speak in a way that affirmed and uplifted their lives.
Yeah, the title is, like you said, it is long, but it is a beautiful title in itself. And I wonder, and the part of this segment we always ask, kind of what you would say to the audience right now, and specifically, what would you say to kids out there right now who may not have read this or are struggling right now? I know it's such a hard time right now with school and the pandemic and all this kinds of stuff. And so that on top of having conversations like this in your life. And I wonder what you would kind of offer them as we're closing out this segment with you.
Well, for adults, I would say prepare yourself for the conversation. You owe your children that. It's such an essential conversation that you can't afford to stumble through it or to offer cliches, because they are bombarded, as you mentioned, by so many harms. You have the pandemic, you have white supremacy, right? You have economic decline. And they're experiencing all of these things at the same time. Some of our young people are wrestling with hunger, right? And challenges related to those realities. And I've always believed that children demand honesty, right? Of course, you have to attempt to put it in a way that they can understand it, but we should always be honest with them and prepare them for the world in which they live. So I would say to an adult, prepare yourself, educate yourself about these realities. Because when your child comes to ask you about what's going on in the world, and they will, you want to be ready. And one of the ways in which you can educate yourself is take advantage of the multiplicity of resources that are before you. And I would hope and pray that for beautiful Black boys who believe in a better world, it's something that you will access, regardless of your standing in life, regardless of your background, as a way to talk about this very pressing issue. For young people, I will tell them what I seek to tell them through the book, which is that you can and you will change the world. I believe that fundamentally. And I embrace, as a part of this work, words that were offered by the late Tupac Amaru Shakur, who said, I might not change the world, but I will spark the brain or the mind of the one who will. And that's what my hope is, that beautiful Black boys who believe in a better world is sparking these young minds to envision a world void of racism, void of gun violence, void of police brutality. And you can't wait until that day comes to start imaging it and imagining it, because it never will come. You have to believe in a world where chattel slavery is no longer present when you are as an abolitionist before it's your reality. You've got to dream of a world where Jim Crow ceases, right? Even though you are still looking at white only and Black only signs. The same is true for us. We have to envision this world, particularly as young people, where these harms no longer exist while they're still very real and present with us. And that hope, that vision, will then carry us in our fight for justice until it becomes our reality. So young people, you will change the world. You will go further than we ever thought. You are the wildest dreams of our ancestors, and we are cheering you on.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for being here. Thank you for writing this and illustrating and producing this timely book. Thank you for making the title not only a message of hope, but an affirmation, a declaration to not just Black boys, but Black youth, to this world, to this nation, that Black boys do matter, despite what the media might show them, or they might learn or experience throughout history or in their daily lives. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciated learning more about this book, learning more about you. We need to bring you back. I feel like we need to bring Michael back, because there's a lot that he mentioned in his intro. And I'm like, I want to ask questions about that, but we're going to focus. We only have 30 minutes and we up with the book. So
well, listen, I'd love
you
to
might
come
get an
back.
email for us for next year.
Well, listen, I'd be honored to come back. I actually have a nonfiction adult book that comes out in January. The foreword is by Beto O'Rourke, who ran, and the book is called Something in the Water, a 21st Century Civil Rights Odyssey. We'd love to share that with you. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention very quickly, for beautiful Black boys who believe in a better world, there is a study guide, a discussion guide, an activity guide produced by the Muhammad Ali Center that will help you have these dialogues as well. So take advantage of that guide that is also extended online, as well as a coloring sheet for the young people. Thank you so much for the joy of being with you.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll definitely have to have you back then for the next season. So yeah, we'll be in contact. And I put in the comment section of the stream where you can get the book and also where you can get the study guide. It's all on there. But thank you so much, Michael, for being here. And yeah, we'll see you soon. We'll see you again.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, Michael. Wow.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Such a yeah, such a great resource and for people to have. Yeah, and we're gonna switch gears now because, as we all know, we're in that season. We are in that time of a holiday in which we call Thanksgiving, which is very different this year in many, many ways. But we also wanted to kind of talk about rethinking what maybe Thanksgiving is. We're all rethinking it right now because some of us are not with our families, some of us are trying to stay safe, trying to keep our family safe, or we should be. And yeah, it's a lot. It's very complicated now, this holiday. But we are going to welcome one of our great friends, Irv Porter, to the show, and I'm so glad he's here. Hey, Irv.
Hello.
How are you?
Greetings. Good. Greetings from very wet Pacific Northwest. It's pouring rain out there.
Oh no. Well, we hope that it doesn't interfere with the internet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're so glad you're here. And yeah, we're here to kind of talk about rethinking what Thanksgiving is. But before that, we'll ask you to introduce yourself and kind of what you do and your context and where you're at right now.
Sure. My name is Irvin Porter. I am associate for Native American Intercultural Congregational Support. I have been doing that since June of 2013. I am also a quarter-time pastor at Church of the Indian Fellowship in Tacoma, Washington. And I've been doing that since 2001. So wear two hats, as it were. And so I'm glad to be with you.
Thank you, Irv. And I'm just going to ask you to unpack your title or duties a little bit further. So what exactly does your long, fancy associate title mean for the PCUSA?
It got longer since I've been on the job. What that basically means is that I'm the liaison person between the Presbyterian Church USA and 95 Native American congregations throughout the country. Most of those congregations, with a couple of exceptions, are actually on Indian reservations. Phoenix has Central Presbyterian, which is in downtown Phoenix. And then the church here in Tacoma is technically on a reservation. The land is reservation, but it's surrounded by the city of Tacoma, so you'd never know. So for all intents and purposes, it is an urban congregation. So what I do is I encourage and help those congregations to either revitalize or to do leadership training, development, those kinds of things. And then we have many conferences throughout the year. And of course, two of those had to be canceled this year. Our youth conference, which is national and held every 3 years. And then our men's Presbyterian conference is held every other year. Our women's conference is held every other year as well, but they're in offsetting years. So next year, we'll have all three in 1 year because of the pandemic. But the flip side of what I do as well is that I work with the denomination, churches, committees, agencies within the Presbyterian Church when they have questions or want to know about certain issues going on within the Presbyterian Church, such as the response or how it's going or how it's affected. COVID-19 has affected various Native American communities. The Navajos have been hit the worst. It is just rampant there, and they're doing a little bit better, but they're so remote. They're probably one of our most remote reservations and one of the most remote areas where we have Presbyterian churches. There are hundreds of miles between each other. And they're out in the middle of nowhere almost. To them, it's not nowhere, but for those of us that live in the city, it's like, where's my cell phone service? That kind of thing. I've visited many of those congregations, And that's also part of what I do is I visit as many congregations as I can, at least 4 or 5 during the year as my travel permits. And then the other thing I do for the denomination is to do presentations. I've done 3 or 4 in the building there in Louisville. We call it the blanket exercise. I've done that 3 times and made other presentations there in Louisville as well. Congregations asked me to come and make presentations. Specifically, once the General Assembly started to do work on Native issues starting in 2016, they've done some before, but not as prolific as they have been since 2016. That was the repudiation of the doctrine of discovery, the apology to Native Americans for the church's part in the boarding school experiment back in the last century. Most recently, we had 2 committees that submitted reports to them that they asked for. And then we had the assessments of all of our properties, all of the 95 churches across the country, because they're in appalling conditions. And so we hired a professional to work with us, Steve Hirsch. He went to every single one of those churches, submitted a report to the General Assembly. And so the price tag, if we were to fix those in the next year, is about $5.3 million. And that would completely fix everything that's wrong. So what we have going based on that was a fund that is now at the foundation, and congregations, individuals, groups can give to that particular fund. And then these congregations will be able to submit proposals, and out of that money will come help for them to make these needed repairs. But also their presbyteries and their synods are doing their part as well to help. So we can't just concentrate on one fund or whatever. And to tell you the truth, the Native people were a little surprised that the General Assembly just didn't give that money over, which we know they don't do. So we've had to be very creative in the meantime about it. And you know, Native American people, one of the things that we always pride ourselves in is adapting. We're given a situation, we adapt to it. We were thrown off of our lands and put on reservations and on and on and on. But we've been able to adapt and make those things work out in the end for us. And so we're used to adapting. We're used to that kind of thing. But also, our Native congregations are used to people coming out and doing surveys and reports and all, and nothing ever happens. So we're going to make sure that that's not the case this time.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the doctrine of discovery, which has really impacted Native people for centuries. And in connection to that, this narrative of the story of Thanksgiving kind of has manifested in that way, manifested from that in many ways. And I know when I was in school, I did not learn the true history of what Thanksgiving was. And I don't think a lot of people in school and children are learning necessarily what the real story of Thanksgiving is. And so it is a more complicated history, and in all honesty, a very heart-wrenching history and a very awful history. And so yeah, I wonder about that narrative of Thanksgiving and how we are to really rethink this moment, this holiday, as people who are very much misinformed about the actual history of it.
I have a friend, his name is Randy Woodley. Randy is a Kituwa Cherokee Native person. He is a teacher, a poet, an activist, a former minister, a missionologist, and a historian. And he had some advice just on that exact issue about what can we do as not just Native people, not just as white people, but as Americans, do to correct that or to get by that Thanksgiving myth, as most Native people call it. And he said this: in spite of our ugly history, no, actually, because of the atrocities, I want to suggest that we all continue to celebrate Thanksgiving, but with a caveat. Settler folks must be educated to realize that Thanksgiving in America didn't begin with the Pilgrims. For thousands of years, many feasts of Thanksgiving have been characteristic of all Native American tribes, and this phenomenon continues today. Settler immigrants, he said, should reorient their thinking to view that first Thanksgiving as the first opportunity for them to join millennia-old traditions among American indigenous people to thank God, who is already present before the arrival of English, and thank God for the land upon which they are living. So that really, he's not condemning anybody or anything. However, he's moving us forward. And I thought once I heard Randy say these words, that it was very, very contemporary, what a Native American person can, what kind of advice a Native person can give to modern Americans about all this mythology that goes around. We certainly have Native people in our country. I have Native people in my church here who will not celebrate Thanksgiving just because of the colonization, all of the, I could be here in hours unpacking all of that. But they just will not, and they refuse to celebrate it, and all of those kinds of things. And so many people ask if American Indians celebrate Thanksgiving Day. And as with any question about Native people, there are many different viewpoints and many different opinions about that question. For some, like myself, it's a day which focuses around my family, friends, food, fellowship, and football, specifically Dallas Cowboy football. Sorry to say. No, I'm not. For Christian Native people, it is a day for all those things and a time to pause with gratitude and to thank God for all the blessings that He has bestowed upon us throughout the past year. But being thankful to God is not just a one-day event either. It's a way of life. And it is a way of life for most Native American people, regardless of their religious views. Native people are raised with the knowledge that the Creator takes care of us and provides for us as well. So some ask, well, that sounds like Christian belief. And you probably would be correct. There are many Christian values that were already part of Native American lifeways before the English ever arrived. When I was growing up in West Phoenix, Arizona, Thanksgiving Day was sometimes where my dad piled 8 of us kids into the car, and we would drive to an eastern suburb of Phoenix where many of my relatives lived and still live today. It was a time of playing with our cousins, seeing all kinds of relatives, some we never knew before, and enjoying a great Thanksgiving meal. Lots of leftovers would go home with us too. And many Native people utilize the holiday to get together with their families and friends and to share a large meal together, and without once thinking of, quote, the first Thanksgiving Day, unquote, in 1621. When we gathered on Thanksgiving Day, whether we're with our relatives or in our own homes as we think about our families, wherever they're at, food and being thankful to God who provided it all. Yet there are many Native Americans, like I said, that will not and do not celebrate Thanksgiving Day because it is a terrible reminder of the arrival of those pilgrims and other European colonists as well. Loss of land, either through treaty or theft, arrival of unknown diseases which annihilated millions of Native people, sometimes completely decimating tribes, destruction of the environment which sustained the wildlife, water resources, plants, both wild and cultivated, as well as an intolerance of their ancient religions. It's really ironic that Thanksgiving takes place during American Indian and Alaska Heritage Month. An even greater irony is that more Americans today identify the day after Thanksgiving as Black Friday than as National Native American Heritage Day, which it has been designated. Most textbooks and accompanying materials portray Native Americans as at that first Thanksgiving as supporting players. They're depicted as nameless, faceless, generic, quote unquote, Indians who merely shared a meal with the courageous pilgrims. The real story is much deeper, much richer, and more nuanced. Like the Wampanoag, the tribe that welcomed the pilgrims, thousands of Native American nations and millions of people in those communities across the continent had their own histories and their own cultures. Native people would continue to be an essential part of the story of the United States of America. Native people only wish to encourage that teachings about Thanksgiving be done in a way that recognizes contributions of this country's original people and gives real meaning to November as American Indian Heritage Month. The agricultural practices and the traditional foods of Native people would be good starting point, since the abundant Thanksgiving feast of turkey, cranberry, mashed potatoes would not exist if it were not for the knowledge and the ingenuity of the Native peoples of the Americas. Truth and reconciliation is needed in telling the story of the first Thanksgiving. Yes, there are many Native Americans who celebrate Thanksgiving Day, but how they do it is so varied as the foods that they help introduce into the world, which has been grown on this continent centuries before the English ever arrived. Yes, there are many Native Americans who see Thanksgiving Day as a day of mourning for the loss of culture, languages, lands, and especially the loss of countless tribal people to disease, wars, and genocide that was perpetrated on them now for over 500 years. For me, a Native American minister of the Presbyterian Church USA, the hope of my faith in Jesus Christ and the blessings given to family, friends, and to our country is my focus, not just on the fourth Thursday of November, but also for the other 364 days of the year. And I end this by saying Psalm 91 reminds us, I will give thanks to you, Lord, with all my heart. I will tell of all your wonderful deeds. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God. Yeah. And I am what you mentioned before about kind of the reorientation of and the fact that God was already here, like that is something that is so powerful to think about. Like even before, I mean, like the pilgrims got here, the God was already in this place in so many beautiful ways. And that is a great reminder for people to remember. And that really, I really needed to hear that too, because that does kind of change, that the whole kind of concept of what Thanksgiving can be. And so that is very powerful to really think about. And so thank you, for that.
And some people,
for that message.
Some Native Americans have told me to my face that how can you celebrate that day? You're a Native American and all that kind of stuff. I said, well, when we sit down, I just explain to you what's in our minds when we sit down to that table and we come into the room, albeit not this year, to gather with family and friends and all that. Usually on Thanksgiving, we go to my wife's family who lives up in the Seattle area, about 40 miles from here, and we spend the Thanksgiving day with them. And although they're Seahawks fans, we do it anyway. But this year, not so much. But like I tell them, I said, when we sit down to the table, when we come into the room together, we're not saying, hey, all right, the Pilgrims. Yeah, that first Thanksgiving, that's the last thing on our mind. First thing on our mind is being together as a family. Second thing is thanking God for his blessings and asking for more blessings for the next 12 months as we go along. Again, for Native people, celebrating one day out of the year is just kind of ridiculous. I mean, every moment, every day, when you open your eyes till you lay your head on that pillow, opportunities for us to be thankful to God for many things, not just in church or at mealtime or whatever. My wife and I, when we have our grace for our meal, one of the things we always pray is that God will be with us as we travel about the roads and highways of our city here. More than once, we have thanked God for that prayer because we came real close a few times. And living in a metropolitan area, you know, it's a hazard. And so there's many things that people can be grateful to God for, and really shouldn't wait for one day out of the year. I have a sermon that's called that we should practice Thanksgiving, and not just one Sunday, one day, one fourth Thursday out of every November.
Thank you, Irv. So you lifted up a lot. And I feel as if it was just a good taste for people to start percolating in their minds and thinking about different nuanced ways on how to celebrate Thanksgiving. If they're one of those people who grew up with that classic American story, they might need some proof or some more resources to, actually dive deep and divulge the truth. Where can people go for resources? Is your office one, or do you have a couple that you can lift up, or maybe an email address for people who are questioning or discerning and want to know more about how they can change the narrative of Thanksgiving for their family, or to learn about the first true Thanksgiving?
There are a lot of resources, a lot of good information, scholarly information, not just opinion. Comes from various Native American publications online. The National Congress of American Indians, NCAI, has a site, and they have many good materials. The Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C., has also on their webpage some very, very good resources as well. If you're a teacher, you can go to that tab on their webpage, and there's lessons and that they reference there as well. And I've printed many, many, many of those types of resources out. I got folders, notebooks just full of these kinds of resources, and I give those out, the links out readily to anybody who asks, especially people that I know are teachers. There's a good book by, his last name is Silverman, and I can't find his first name, but he wrote a book last year, and it was about this time they introduced it, and it's called This Land Was Their Land. And it talks about the Wampanoag people who met the Pilgrims. And it really unpacks scholarly. He's not Native American. He really unpacks the scholarship about what happened during those first, particularly the first 50 years, which ended terribly for the Wampanoag people. Most recently, they were allowed in 2017, they were finally given land back in the Massachusetts area. And then in 2013, I believe it was, they were finally recognized as a federally recognized tribe. So it took over 400 years for them to get that certification. And there's some tribes in the West where that was done readily because they're bigger. And there's all kinds of conditions that go with becoming a federally recognized tribe. But nevertheless, that's where they're at. And they are the ones that lead the National Day of Mourning. There's a statue on a knoll that overlooks that Plymouth Rock, that historical site. And it's the statue of Massasoit. And he was the chief of the local Wampanoag people who met with the Pilgrims, stayed in their village in the whole 9 yards. And so that National Day of Mourning is held at the bottom of that statue. And Native American people from New England gather there on Thanksgiving Day every year. In fact, you'd probably be able to find it like on YouTube or CNN, but they always telecast it. And it's a National Day of Mourning for all of to remember mostly the people that were annihilated, both by wars, and by disease. Many of the diseases that the English brought, the English already had immunity to, but they also brought animals that had never been part of this country. And so the animals carried disease, which is not a problem for the English people, nor us today. Pigs and cattle and stuff like that. We don't think twice about eating that meat, some of us anyway. But for those people who had never experienced that, the disease just rampaged through their villages. One of those that is most popular is Squanto. Squanto was one of the members of the Wampanoag people as well, and he knew how to speak perfect English because he was kidnapped and taken into slavery into Spain and then into England, and then eventually they took him to Newfoundland, and he got with this explorer guy, and he said, "I know the area, I can lead you to da." So he took him over there, and when he got to his old village, it was completely gone. There was nobody there. And what happened was he found out from the other people was that that disease just wiped them out. So there's sad stories like that, that if you get that book, that This Land Was Their Land, will tell how that all happened, names of people. They went through the records, both in England and the colonial records, because the thing that these people did was they wrote about all this victorious winning over the native people and all that kind of stuff that they did. So there's a lot of documentation, even in Spain, about what happened. It's widely unknown that a lot of the native people, when they were in warfare with the English, that a result of that, if they were not outright killed, was that many of them were sent into slavery, into the Caribbean, into the West Indies, into Spain, and were never heard from again. And that's just one of those stories, like you were saying, Lee, that we just don't know about. It's never taught. It's never talked about. All this country wants to do is focus on those little paper feather hats and the headdress and the pilgrims and the little pageants on November with the kids and all that kind of stuff. And they don't want to talk about what really happened.
Yeah, well, I hope that this is the beginning of a conversation to where we can talk about, the reality. We are in a moment now where, realities are created so easily, false ones, and that's happening more and more. And the more we can speak to reality, and the more that we can speak to honesty and face the history, the more we can really, I hope we can move toward justice. So I think things like this and conversations like this can get us started on that. And so thank you, for being here and starting this conversation and allowing us and inviting us to think about what this holiday means and nuancing it a little bit more. So thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome. I'm hoping that as this pandemic gets over, that we can have a lot of these kinds of conversations in the building there in Louisville and have some symposiums and invite some of these people in for you to hear, for folks to hear. Mr. Silverman, for one thing, other Native American female leaders from the East Coast. They have more female leaders in the East Coast Native than we have in the rest of the country because they're a matrilineal society. So I would just love to see a whole day full of all that kind of, like a colloquy of letting people know and understand a little bit more about these things that I'm telling you. Tip of the iceberg.
Well, yeah. Well, let us know any way we can help with that. We are here for that, and we're here to help you. And I would love to be to help out with that. So let's make it work whenever we can see each other face to face. And I hope that's really soon. But it's good to see you, Irv, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Irv.
Bye-bye.
Well, Destiny,
I can't believe this is the last episode.
I know, and it's always good to see Irv.
It was a good one, though. We had 2 double hitters that were, talking about some really powerful
and
things.
To really invite us to think a lot differently than we are right now. Because I remember in kindergarten, we dressed up as pilgrims. Some of us dressed up as pilgrims. Some of us dressed up as Native Americans. And when you were young, and looking back on it, you wonder, why is that kind of seen as an innocent thing, when it, in all actuality, it was not. And I think just to kind of be explicit about it, condemning those things, genocide, basically, and how we are continuing to perpetuate that with cultural genocide. I mean, with the erasure of language and culture and all that's been done intentionally by white supremacy and colonialism, and
under the name of Jesus.
And under the name of Jesus.
Real about it.
Yes, we are a faith and justice talk show, but most of those things were done in the name of God. The doctrine of discovery was a papal bull. It was written and issued by the Pope. And if you haven't read that, go read it. Unbound, I'll put it in the comments. Unbound did a series about the doctrine of discovery. Actually, I'm gonna put it in the comments right now before we close. But do the research. These things were done in the name of faith, and mission and colonialism were the vehicles for white supremacy and racism and genocide, and we have to wrestle with that, and we really have to be honest about that. So, to all of our faith people out there, it's a part of our narrative, a deep part. And our Native American siblings are continuing to have to suffer because of this. So I'm glad Irv was with us today.
Yeah, me too.
But Destiny, before we close,
I don't know. We closing.
Yeah, before we close, this has been great. This has been such an honor to do this with you.
Likewise, and from when it started off, just first guest Simon, and what it manifested to be from us, doing it over Zoom with the cats interrupting and dogs barking, to it being a little live stream media production. This has been great, and thank you to all the guests that we had on for the past almost 40 episodes. The information and knowledge that you bestowed on us has been great, and I just thank you, Lee, for being my co-host and saying yes and dreaming crazy with me when everyone else didn't think this could be a thing. We did something risky and put it out there and see if people liked it, and y'all actually loved it, so we kept doing it.
Wow. And we just kept keeping on, and did it.
That's what my grandma says. Just keep on keeping on.
Just keep on keeping on. And but this is not it. This is our last episode of this season. This was the season finale. We will come back at the beginning of next year. We're going to take all the month of December off, and plan, and get the guest set up and maybe have some new things for y'all. But this has been great. And I am so honored to be a part of it. And it's been great to be your co-host, Destiny. And I'm going to miss it for a month. So yeah. And I think we ended very well. For y'all to take away. I put resources in the comments. Go and check out the book by Michael W. Waters, For Beautiful Black Boys Who Believe in a Better World. Go check out the resources that Porter mentioned about Native American history and the real story of Thanksgiving. And again, what he said, we could just end it on this, that God was here before the Pilgrims. God was here before the Puritans. God was already here in so many more beautiful ways. And I hope God is with you on your Thanksgiving, and be safe.
Be safe. Wash your hands. Wear your mask. And please don't have a bunch of people at your house. Do it a Zoom. Cook your little meal at home. It's okay. Y'all shouldn't really be celebrating Thanksgiving the way you've been celebrating the way it's current to earth. You need to restructure it. So why not start this year to really reflect on how you're going to serve Thanksgiving in a purposeful manner starting next year.
Yeah. Yeah. Think about it. It's the perfect time to reflect on what this means. And if you need to be given permission to not feel guilty about not being with your family, or we'll give you the permission to not feel guilty, because
we won't be with I'm not going to be with my family.
I will not be with my family. And nobody should feel guilty about that, because we are trying to keep people safe, and we are trying to, the pandemic is spreading, and you are doing what you are to do to help our hospital staff, to help our medical facilities, because they are struggling right now.
Yes.
And we should all pray for them, and we should pray for their mental health and their physical health, because we are doing this for them. And I know here in Nashville, it's close to being at capacity. Hospitals are close to being at capacity. And also a thing too, like, people, it's all different kind of contexts. People have different contexts, and we don't know the decisions you're making right now. So we ain't gonna make you feel guilty, but we are going to give the people who do feel guilty permission to not feel guilty, because we're trying to keep people safe. And we are with you, and we're praying that God is with you during this time.
Also praying for those who are alone, isolated, and by themselves. Please reach out to your loved ones who you know are going to be by themselves for Thanksgiving. Anxiety, depression runs high during this holiday season, so please reach out to your friends, family, and loved ones as well.
Yes, indeed. And we won't see you for Christmas, so happy holidays. Merry Christmas.
Happy Thanksgiving, New Year, all of it.
All those things. We won't see you for those.
Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, all of it.
All of that.
Because we are out.
We will not be here. But again, stay safe. It's going to get worse. And not to be, what is it called? A catastrophic thinker. But it's going to get worse. And prepare yourself, and prepare your families, and reflect about it. But we love y'all, and we will see you in the new year.
Bye.